there's a delay, so. Howdy, everyone. Good morning from Texas. We're going to give it a moment or two to let people start trickling in, and then we'll kick this off. As those are joining us, remember, within the chat windows, please leave questions. You got an amazing group today, as always, with this Talent War group on a very interesting subject that I know everyone is passionate about. Everyone's an avid reader, but start filling up those questions for this group in the chat windows. We'll make sure that we get to as many as possible.
Let the way through.
All right, give it about 30 more seconds here. We'll kick this off. What do you guys think? Does everyone in the group need those? We can get those ordered for the entire group. I think we'll get them out. We actually have cool patches coming in. We're slowly building up the gear that'll be for sale on the website.
You know, Velcro patches are mandatory.
And so we've got them, Lisa. Funny you ask. These were for the book. They're the PVC, the rubber, very
Nice.
sturdy. So we got these coming in. I should get them from China, unfortunately. That was my only option there, guys, because of the quality actually is legitimate. So once we get those in, Lisa, Fran, I'll get them out to all you guys. You can sport them on your backpacks or shirts that have Velcro on them still. All right, we'll kick this off. Welcome to today's Talent War podcast, which is being hosted by Lisa Jaster. So I'll start with her. Lisa didn't provide me a bio, but Lisa is an amazing Army leader still within the reserves. She is a battalion commander, which is no small feat. Try leading about 100 to 200 soldiers that are all alpha males, whether they're men or women. They all have their own agendas, and they all want to go in different directions. And it's Lisa's job with an amazing cast of leaders to make sure that all 200 of those soldiers are moving in the right direction. But she went to West Point, served for a number of years, and strangely went to Ranger School. Has a glutton for punishment at the age of 37, and as she was turning 38, graduated Ranger School, becoming the third woman in the history of the Army to graduate that school, a 245-year institution that has produced more leaders than any other organization in this land, the U.S. Army. And I think if I'd asked Dalton, Rich, or Fran if they would go through the Special Forces qualification course at 37, their answer, or Bud's, would be hell no. I don't know if my body can make it. Next up, we've got Fran Racioppi. We were laughing about this because I always mess up his name. He's got an Italian name like me. Usually people call me Sarraille. That's not how it's pronounced. Well, Fran is the founder of FRSix, which is a security management firm. He previously held the roles of CEO of a consumer products company and director of global security at a major tech company. Fran was a Green Beret. Highly respect that community, having served multiple tours in the Middle East, Europe, and across Africa. Below him, you'll see Dalton Rice, also a former Green Beret, having served multiple tours in the Middle East, Europe, and Africa as well. Before accepting the opportunity in public administration as a management analyst, he previously held varying operational and administrative roles in the healthcare sector. I know Dalton is very particularly passionate about leadership in the federal, state, and public sectors. I've also got Nayara, who is a digital marketing associate by way of Spain. Her father was in the Spanish military. Next to her, I've got Chris Palmisano, brother from the Marine Corps. He's the founding COO at Rocket Dollar, which is a fintech company here in Austin. So he and I are both co-located here. He previously held leadership roles in sales, marketing, and operations at several technology companies, including SolarWinds and Google Cloud. Chris is a former U.S. Marine Corps communications officer and Iraq War veteran. He teaches entrepreneurship as well at St. Edward's University in Austin, which Nayara is a St. Edward's business student. And then lastly, I've got Rich Diviney, who Rich will say we served together. Rich was much higher ranking than I was. While we served together, he was a mentor. And Rich and I, when on active duty in the SEALs, would talk about leadership all the time. In fact, I remember one when you were the operations officer of a specific command, and we had a long 1-hour conversation about leadership. That's what great leaders do. They make time to pull their subordinate leaders in and have those discussions. But Lisa, interesting topic today. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. I really wanted to discuss this topic specifically, how readership improves leadership, because it was a lesson I learned a little later in life. In college, you're forced to read. In high school, you're forced to read. I think even back then, I was trying to get the crib notes and maybe not read the whole book. But over time, I had more and more leaders in the Army and all military branches. You have officer professional development. And a lot of times those include someone senior to you, a mentor, handing you a book saying, read this and let's discuss it. And sometimes it becomes a little bit like a book club. But if you're reading military history, tactics, it also helps with your professional development. Well, the same holds true with regards to the corporate America. And I have a couple of interesting examples. In the last few months, I had to go in to see a client, and on the board, he had a little whiteboard outside his office, and it said, "Welcome to 1984." I walked into that office, and within 2 minutes, seeing that board, I had a wealth of knowledge about the client I was meeting. I had a great opener for discussion points, because I had also read 1984, and I read it more than once. And it was a way to communicate with a complete stranger or to build a relationship very early. Recently, I read The Tattooist of Auschwitz. So that's a autobiography. And it was a very interesting book. My son actually read it. And we were able to talk about history and talk about World War II and talk about concentration camps in a way that was a lot more interesting than just reading it in a history book. Heck, even recently, there's a 3rd grade book that is called A Tree Named Steve. And I walked out to my property. We just built a house, or we're in the process of building a house. And there's this huge, beautiful oak tree. And my daughter called it Steve. And we ultimately ended up changing the entire layout of our house and our yard to save the tree named Steve. Again, these are all examples of different ways that I was able to connect with people, to include a 7-year-old, because of books that we had in common. And that's important. Connecting is important, but it becomes even more important when you're talking about leadership. So I recently, 2 years ago, interviewed for a job, and the owners of the company, when I was interviewing, said, "We follow extreme ownership." And this was during my first interview, and I had a follow-up interview a week later. So as I said, I've been kind of slow to get in the readership game, but I'm on the road a lot. So I bought the audiobook and listened to it over the 3.5-hour drive back to my home from the interview, and continued to listen to it on my commute to work. And by the time I showed up to the second interview, I knew that the fundamental concepts that the company was touting as their own, the leadership values that they were stating that they believed in, were completely aligned with both my military background as well as where I wanted to go professionally. So again, through the mention of a book title, I went from, I wonder if this is a good fit, to this is most definitely a good fit. And then there's another benefit to reading as a leader, and that's your employees or your talent, the people you want to keep around, aren't necessarily from the same background as you or don't have the same history as you do. So I have found that getting interested in what an employee or a coworker is interested in is a great way to make that connection, similar to the 1984 story. So I was working deep water offshore for Shell Oil Company, and honestly, those guys who worked out there, those construction foremen, were fabulous at their jobs. But I was able to go out there, talk to them about construction, and we're living, breathing, eating, sleeping all on a rig. So I needed more so that they felt comfortable coming to me. I needed more of a connection. And all I did was look at their computer screens, and almost all of them had muscle cars as their screensavers. So between one offshore tour and the next time I came out, I bought some muscle magazines, learned about carburetors, engines, and a little bit of gearhead topics. And I wasn't bilingual in cars, but I did get to the point where I could communicate with them and demonstrate that I'm interested in more than just driving them to make money. I was interested in them as a person. So bringing the readership to leadership back to a more fundamental leadership discussion is, I don't want to just come to work. I want to be part of a team. I want to grow and develop that team. And to do that, I need to feel like I'm part of the group. I need to build my tribe. And those who I want to retain within our ranks also have to feel like they're part of a team. So there's a bunch of different reasons why reading is extremely important. And I'm just skimming over the top of them. But I do want to get the opinions of some of the other panel members and kind of why do you believe that readership truly improves your leadership? I'm going to start by bugging you, Fran.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate you putting the topic forward, because it's so important, and it's something that we often as leaders go to and say, oh, I'm too busy. Oh, I don't have the time. I can't read. I have other things that I have to focus on, and it becomes overcome by other events. But leadership is dynamic and it's ever changing, and different points in a company's life cycle require you as a leader to be a different type of leader and exude a different type of leadership. So just as a company and product lines are constantly iterating, we as leaders have to constantly iterate and continue to make ourselves better. You talked about professional development, and often in the corporate world and even in the military, professional development is a term that gets thrown out there with not a whole lot of meat behind it. It's misimplemented, it's misdiscussed, it's misused as a term. And in a lot of companies, it's a compliance-driven function where someone will say, oh, the boss said we have to professionally develop the team. And then a leader will come in and say, oh, we're going to do professional development. But I mean, what does that mean? How do you do professional development, right? It's this nebulous term. Well, the only way you can start to effectively understand professional development is by identifying your strengths and weaknesses. And if you identify your strengths and weaknesses, then you can focus that professional development. And reading is one aspect that allows you to focus professional development. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. I mean, it could be as simple as, trying to understand how to better time manage, how to handle chaos and confusion, how to be a better project management, or, the foot stomp for the talent war group, how do we hire and develop talent at a much higher level? So these are critical things that you need when you're defining your professional development programs, and then you're tying in readership. To me, we've talked a lot about, in the talent war group, the 9 characteristics of high potential talent, and drive, resiliency, adaptability, humility, integrity, effective intelligence, team ability, curiosity, emotional strength. Well, when you tie in readership to those, I believe that there's 4 of those attributes that are critical that you as a leader have to identify in yourself to be an effective use of readership to become a better leader. And that's drive, the need for achievement, a growth mindset, be better today and tomorrow than I was yesterday, always have a need for continuous improvement, and it's a learn it all. And one of the ways to learn it all is through reading. The next one, humility. We got to recognize as leaders that we don't have all the answers. We have to be a willing learner. We have to maintain that self-awareness. We have to seek others' input and their feedback to make more educated decisions. And when we have to understand that the aggregate intelligence of the group is more important and more meaningful than just what one person brings to the table. The third one is readership increases effective intelligence and the ability to apply one's own experience and knowledge to a situation and find a solution to that. You can only absorb and do so many things during the course of a day when you're focused on your job or your one thing. But when you enhance that by reading, you're exposing yourself to so many more exponential amounts of experiences that you can then use to build your effective intelligence. And finally, curiosity. Readership, you can switch it up. You don't have to read all biographies. And there was a point in time where I thought I only had to read biographies, but no, you don't. You can read fiction, nonfiction. You can read about so many different topics. And that's a curiosity to learn things that you didn't know before. That increases effective intelligence. That makes you more adaptable. You exhibit humility, and it's your drive to change the status quo and become better than you were every single day.
Fran, you kind of led right into our next question, which is from Weston Davis asked, does anyone mix in fiction for variety, to take a break, or to learn other life lessons? Rich, I think you had a comment on this.
Yeah, thank you. And it's great to be here. So what a great question. And I think it's certainly congruent with one of the main reasons why I love to read. So neurology and neuroscience tells us that creativity is in fact an ability to create connections between diverse elements and diverse topics. And so what reading fiction or anything outside of our normal venues does is allows us to begin to understand a topic or some content that we have not understood or learned about before. And then suddenly we can begin to sometimes make connections between those two, right? So one of the problems sometimes with military reading programs is that the books are solely focused on kind of the military genre, whether it be military history or tactics or whatever. And I remember, and Mike probably remembers this too, when we were in at this specialized command together, one of the things that we were doing in our training department was we were putting together a library. And the idea was, let's get as many different types of books in this library as possible to give folks at the command an opportunity to read about anything they wanted to read about. Because if you read about even just like basket weaving, and suddenly you're able to make a neural connection to, say, military tactics, that's the creative spark. And so fiction does this for us in spades. I mean, you just think about the Star Wars universe, for example. All of the Star Wars universe, this is stuff that came out of one man's head, right? Yet today, a high percentage of our space program is based upon things that the folks in the space program today saw as kids watching Star Wars or Star Trek. Now that's a movie, of course, but reading can be addressed the same way. So reading fiction is certainly recommended in terms of the creativity aspect, and I think it's also recommended just in terms of the escape mechanism. So so often we're using TV shows and other venues to escape, and our brains actually need that escape. So there's nothing wrong with it. There's only something wrong with it if we're always escaping, which a lot of people are guilty of. But escape, the kind of the mental escape from reading or by reading fiction can actually help our brains kind of rest and recover, get off of these these focuses and topics that we've been on all day, and kind of just give a new, fresh perspective, right? And allow us to see things in other ways. And the only thing I'll leave you with is there's an old Ethiopian proverb that says the fish is the last to discover water. And what this means is that, of course, the fish is not going to realize that that water exists because they're living in it, right? And so what reading does, and diverse reading and fiction reading does, is it allows us to get outside of that fishbowl and start to see maybe the water that we've been swimming in the whole time. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why fiction and just diverse topics are so important.
Rich, actually, as you're talking about that, I'm sort of laughing about putting the library together, because one thing is I served in the Marine Corps, so I got a slightly different perspective, and I think Chris will weigh in heavily here. The SEALs weren't good at it wasn't a core strength of like formalizing, let's say professional leadership training. It was sort of innate in our culture of coaching and mentoring, but the Army and the Marine Corps were much further ahead of us in actually formalizing these programs. And the reason Chris may weigh in on this is I remember in the Marine Corps is there was a reading list for every single rank. It was called the Commandant's Reading List. And as you guys talk about fiction here, they chose very select fictional books. And in fact, one of the viewers commented on one of them, Ender's Game, or even Starship Troopers, because even within those novels, there was a lot of leadership tenets or principles that they talked about. So when I choose fiction, I'm very selective based off feedback I get from peers and people that I respect about which fictional books to read. But again, you go back to the Marine Corps and the Army, they have specific lists that they recommend for people of each rank to maturate. And as they attain another rank, the books become a little more nuanced and intricate.
Well, Mike, you might remember they issued us some of those books at OCS. And so they gave us Rifleman Dodd, and they gave us Sun Tzu's The Art of War. And we were reading these books like at night while polishing boots and cleaning rifles. So the Marine Corps reading list has always been actually really helpful. And I remember my first experience, even as a midshipman, having read a book and then started quoting some of what I read to another student. And the captain came down and said, "Hey, did you get that out of XYZ book?" And I said, "Yeah, actually I did." And that started the entire reading program for me, really, because a light bulb went off that I was going to be better at my job if I would continue to read. And Starship Troopers is still one of my favorites. So yes, you should weave in some fiction. And Rich gave you the technical reason why.
We actually have another question, and this one is from Eliza Delgado, and she asks, do you guys view audiobooks as a form of reading? What do you think about that, Dalton?
For a long time, I thought audiobooks were kind of a cop-out. I kind of avoided them. It was, the new technology. I'm like, I'm not going to get into that. Then I started realizing audiobooks are a great supplement to actual books. I'm old school. I like the feel of paper. I like to hold it. I like to read it. I like to turn the pages. But audiobooks are a great time filler when you're in the car. This is a great opportunity to fill those fiction books in, or to take away from, the professional development and the leadership development and personal development books, and to get out of your comfort zone a little bit. One of the audiobooks that I listened to was Sapiens, and it is a phenomenal book, an easy listen, but you get so much out of it. And instead of that hour drive to work or stuck in traffic and listening to music and, horrible talk radio in the morning, put in an audiobook, and before you know it, your 1 hour drive a day is going to turn into 10 books a year, 15 books a year, and then supplement those with some of those hands-on book that may need a little bit more business analytical thought or more assessment. So absolutely, I love audiobooks. I try to keep a running list of them. My wish list is huge, and whenever I'm driving somewhere, even if it's for 15 minutes, or even with the family, they hate it, but I make the kids listen to audiobooks, and we'll listen to the Moscow Rules or the $1 Billion Spy, or something just easy to listen to, and I can listen to it in the background. And on a more personal note, my oldest son, he got into Sapiens. He loved it. He followed it. He listened to it, and he was quoting different parts of that book for real world knowledge. And he would come back to me weeks later and say something in that book, and I'm like, oh my God, he actually retained it. And so it's using that technology and filling those gaps, because hey, I'm sure everybody in this chat, we want that 25th hour in the day, and sometimes filling that 25th hour is audiobooks and filling that time.
Yeah, so I love this question. When I first learned about audiobooks, I initially thought this was kind of like doing push-ups on your knees. And then my thinking on this has totally come around. Actually, we now know, and this is bared out in research, that everyone has their own unique learning style. And some people can pick up a book, they can read one book and they got everything they need out of it. Other people need very hands-on experiences, and they learn with their hands, they learn by doing. Other folks still learn best with following around an expert or following around a mentor and learning from somebody by observation. So what we all really should do is try to build some self-awareness about what our own unique learning style is, and then build our own learning plan based on our unique style. And so, no, like if audiobooks are how you consume books and new material, then you should dive into audiobooks and just absolutely love them. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that that's a great way to learn new material, especially if it aligns really nicely with your learning style. What I tell my students is that I teach entrepreneurship, and it's not a science. So it's not like biology where everything is perfectly, or mathematics where everything is generally perfectly falsifiable, and it's not art either. So it's not like painting or studio art or sculpture. It lives right in the middle, which is, and the best way to teach something like that is an apprenticeship, because it's more of a craft than an art or a science. So what people should do is really, try to align your own learning style to what it is you're trying to learn, and then pull in the best resources. And if it's audiobooks, consume all the audiobooks you can.
And last thing, Chris, on that, with audiobooks, because like I said, I like the hands-on feel of a book. If you have your audiobook app, most of them have notes. If you hear something you like, flag that section, take a note of it. Most of my books that I pick are from other books or audiobooks that I listen to, and I'll write them down, I'll make a note of it, and then I'll go back and research it, and I'll dive into that curiosity of those books and keep learning.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, you guys are spot on. And I'll admit here on this forum that I was adamantly against audiobooks and even like the Amazon Kindle app and anything that I had to do more on my phone until about 6 months ago. And then when the world changed with COVID, and I was, you're there in the house and it's like, well, how do I get a book? I don't know. Oh, I can download a book. Then it opened up for me this whole new world for a lot of the reasons that you just said. I mean, it's so easy now with technology to just highlight a section that you like. And I would sit there with, highlighters for years. I would mark the pages, and then I would write in the margins, and then I would go back and I'd review them, and I'd be like, oh, I highlighted the things, and then I took notes in the margins, and it took me hours and weeks and months to read these books. And then it got put in that too hard box that I talked about. And I was like, oh, I never read, because then I have to have my notebook and I have to have my pen and my highlighter. And now I go on the app, the Kindle app, I find that I've read things way faster because my whole life is now accustomed to picking this thing up and just scrolling through it, right? So my eyes have adjusted much quicker to that reading style. And then when I want to highlight something, I just tap it, highlight it, done. And then there's a whole section where I can just look at the notes and then read through the notes, pull out the important parts, and then move on. So yeah, I mean, huge opportunities with technology, whether it be on audio or digitally.
So I want to highlight something that popped up in the comments, and I'm going to try to read it directly here. The viewer uses the audio to consume more information, but when one of the books resonates, that's when they go and buy the hardcover and start marking it up. So I actually want to dive into this just a little bit more. So I recently trained for and completed my first trail ultramarathon. If you're not a runner, please don't do it. It was absolutely terrible, 33 miles on a rocky trail, but I had a lot of time. And you can only listen to so much music, and you can only think so much. When you're out there running 33 miles, it takes a few minutes. So I started listening to audiobooks. And what I did is, again, I would consume books just like Fran was saying. Digitally, you could do it faster. I think almost everybody mentioned it. You can really hear them quickly. And just like this viewer said, is, well, if something really struck you, you still wanted to take your notes and do more with it. So I would mark it on my phone, and I would end up getting on Amazon.com. I put it on my Christmas wish list, and my family will order it for me for Christmas, birthday, etc. And I'll have the hard copy, but I still have the audio version. So yes, that is a really, really good point. We did actually have another question that I wanted to address here, and this is from Barry Englehart. He writes, can any of you provide a book that has been instrumental to your development as a leader, especially a non-obvious example? So you said the non-obvious example, and I actually have my pile of books here, which includes Good to Great, Extreme Ownership. But one of the ones that I've handed out to a lot of my company commanders, again, Mike mentioned I'm a battalion commander. I have 8 companies underneath me. And so I bought this for each of my company commanders, and it's called The Mission, the Men, and Me. And it's great because it's got a lot of military stories, but it also talks about a lot of fundamentals that are directly applicable to business. Like, the guy on the ground really has the most true story. And you have to listen to your eyes on the ground. You can't, as a leader, just assume you know more. Or there's other military lessons that are extremely applicable, and they're also relatable. It's written in such a way that if you don't know all of the military acronyms, or you don't know all of the history of combat and tactics, you can still get a lot out of the book. So that's one example I have. And then I'm going to give a second example only because Mike mentioned it, and that's Ender's Game, also in my pile. And it just got added to my pile in the hunting stand last week. My son finished it, handed it to me, and said, Mom, you have to read this. So I would say Ender's Game, which Mike already mentioned, as well as The Mission, the Men, and Me. Mike, you had a comment on this as well.
Sorry, on mute. Yeah, so, my book is Once an Eagle by Anton Meyer, which I think is mandatory reading for some military institutions. Basically is a long contrast between two opposing leaders, a good leader and a bad leader. What actually strikes me about this, to drive it home, is the person that actually handed me this book is a peer of Rich and I's, a guy by the name of Chris Fussell, who's the president of McChrystal Group, which you may know as General Stanley McChrystal's group. And that's, to drive home a point for me, that's what great leaders do, is they take a book that was instrumental to them, which Chris had notes all throughout the book. And it was his original copy. And I still have it, and one I need to pass it off to another young leader. But the fact that he would pass a book from his bookshelf that he held dear and gave it to me shows you the impact of readership on leadership.
So I'm going to throw in my book as well, and there are several, of course, but one of the ones I enjoyed the most was a book called Team of Rivals, and it's about Abraham Lincoln and his assemblance of his cabinet. And he was very deliberate about this idea that he was going to bring together diverse personalities and perspectives, and even political beliefs, so that he could effectively try to hear the entire nation. I think from a leadership perspective, again, and I'm going to hammer this home every time you hear me talk, and Mike's heard it so many times already, is that leadership is a behavior. It's not a position. We behave in a way that allows people to decide that we are a leader, and more than just in charge. And so we have to, in that context and in that responsibility, understand, I believe, human behavior, and be cognizant and recognize others, their perspectives, their diversity, what they bring to the table, so that you can effectively not only include everybody, but really capitalize on different perspectives. In true high-performing teams, there's a real acceptance of as many diverse perspectives as possible, because what it does is it allows that team to operate and effectively perform in uncertainty more effectively, because you can lean on perspectives that you may not have, but your teammate might. So Team of Rivals was one of the books that really helped me understand how bringing this diversity together, although difficult, is really hard as a leader to do, because you're not necessarily filling your circle with like-minded folks, or in the kind of the worst case sycophants, you are actually you're filling your ranks, you're filling your circle with people who might be contrary and might speak up and might be devil's advocate more often than you'd like. But I think it's important. And just a quick tip, just to go back really fast. I also listen to audiobooks and podcasts. I usually do it on 1.5 speed because I think it's kind of that net time that we've been talking about. Sometimes I'll carry with me a separate like voice recorder, because if I'm driving or if I'm running or something, I have an idea, I just record it real quick and I listen to it later and jot it down. So a little bit of a pro tip if anybody wants one, if they're listening to books and they need to take notes.
One of the books, kind of touching on what Rich was saying, and it kind of segues into the next question, which we'll touch on from Tim McDaniel. What are your favorite books about personal development? I think all of these books really help us in our personal development. We read because we want to grow personally and professionally, but more importantly, as leaders, especially in the talent world, we don't want to just lead and grow others. We want to lead and grow other leaders. We want other people to carry that torch in the future and to continue our success. We don't want it to just stop with our legacy. We want that legacy to continue on. One of the books that really got me into reading, coming from the Green Beret side of the house, and Fran can speak on this as well, our sole job was to really go in and influence other people and to grow, force multiply, take a few and make many. And in order to do that, you have to have influence, and that influence has no authority. If you go into these communities and these villages across the world, they don't care who you are. You have to build authentic and genuine relationships. And so Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People is a book that I still go back to all the time. It's a great guideline, and it really helped me put into perspective as a leader that my 100% is not going to be your 100%. And it doesn't make you less of a person. It doesn't make you less of a leader, but it helped me realize that in order to grow, in order to push myself beyond the limits, I can't expect everybody to be at my 100%. I have to challenge them and help them grow as leaders at their 100% and help them continue to grow. So Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People is one of my, or How to Make Friends and Influence People is one of my books. And I know Fran had some comments on personal development as well.
Yeah, thanks, Dalton. And I'm gonna answer Tim's question, Tim McDaniel's question about what are your favorite books about personal development. And I'm gonna similarly say to Dalton that to answer that question, I think you have to start with defining what personal development means to you. And Dalton's right, as Green Berets, it's about impact, and it was about impact and influence. And actually, this is something that I'll plug our next one of these conversations that we're going to have on Thursday. We're going to talk a lot about leadership and your place in an organization as a leader. And that comes down to defining who you are, what you care about, what your goals are, and how you operate in an organization to effectively lead that organization. And so when that comes to personal development, I mean, for me, I was a journalism major in undergrad. So I like stories. I like the art of the story. I learned through kind of these detailed stories of people's experiences. And people will tell me that I tell a lot of stories. So I try to keep it short when I do that, and they tell me that. But my themes around impact and influence have created for me this kind of affinity to something, to things like presidential leadership. And Rich hit on Team of Rivals is a book that is great that I read years ago when I studied presidential leadership in college. And that's important to me because as a president, regardless of what party you're in or what time period you are the president, you have to rise to an occasion. Something's going to happen where you're going to have to motivate people, influence them. People are going to look at you, and there's going to be a certain amount of people that are going to want to follow you, and there's going to be a certain amount of people that don't want to follow you. And your job, just like your job as an organizational leader, where you're going to have those same dynamics, because no leader goes into an organization and is liked by 100% of the people there, and 100% of the people there agree with what they want to do. You have to thread that needle, and you have to gain that consensus. And so as I look at my own own personal development, that's a theme that I have rallied around for my readership. And I've read a lot of books on different presidents and the time periods that they led our nation, the challenges that they faced, and not so much the historical portion of what they went through, but how they as people created a team, developed themselves to combat those challenges that they faced and lead our nation forward.
You know, team, I'm sitting here and I can't write fast enough all these book recommendations. I'm thinking we're going to have to start a whole new page of all the great books I need to catch up on. We have another great question that just came in from Nigel Gordon Johnson. Bruce Lee said he didn't fear the man who practiced 10,000 kicks once, but the man who practiced one kick 10,000 times. Should you read a few core books frequently rather than lots of books once? So I want to answer this real quick. I like lots of books because I take notes and have kind of a running list of things I take from each. But I do have some core books that I've gone back to several times. One in the business world is Good to Great. And I've probably read that every year for the last 5 or 6 years. And total probably 8 or 9 times since graduating from college. I think it's really good. And every time I read it, I get a little bit more out of the book. Another one that I really like that isn't necessarily a leadership book, but it's a concept book, which is Tribe by Sebastian Junger. And for those of us in the military, I recommend it to a lot of our non-military friends. And it helps understand kind of the mindset that a lot of military members have. And I like going back to read it because I do recommend it quite frequently. So those are the 2 books I would like to recommend. And then I kind of want to throw this over to Rich and hear what your opinions are.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. And I mean, what a spot on answer, because I do agree. Well, first of all, let's just talk about Bruce Lee. You know, I agree with him in terms of the kicks, right? I mean, but although he probably wouldn't do well in an MMA ring, I would imagine, because one kick's not going to work, right? But he's also talking about learning a skill, okay? And skills are just different, right? You have to practice those things. When we're talking about books and information absorption, again, the more the better. And I do agree that I agree with Lisa. I try to diversify my reading list, but there are some core books that I do hold on to, go back to, revisit the margins that I took notes in, and things like that. So I think there's a little bit of both. I think it's going to be subjective to what you like and enjoy, and I would also include fiction. Some of the great fiction books I like to go back to once in a while, just because they're frankly just entertaining, right? And that's all good. So again, diversity is key. Trying to populate your knowledge stream with as much diversity as possible is always good. But certainly keep those books that you like on the bookshelf, keep them marked up, tabbed up, and keep coming back to them. Because that's those types of repetitive things allow us to learn. So yeah, great question.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add is that as you start reading, you'll figure out which books you really connect with and that really make an impact on you. And keep those books close, keep them on the shelf, and then refer to them each year or on whatever timeline is interesting to you. I've got a number of books that are both military related, business related, and even some of the classics that I'll pull up over and over again. I got into reading about the Stoics when I was in the military. And so I've got a stack of those books, and I generally pull them out, or a couple of them, meditations in particular, at least once at the beginning of each year. And then I've been on a personal entrepreneurial journey for the last couple of years. And there's a really great series of books about startup leadership, being a startup CEO, and even fundraising and that stuff, because you deal with it constantly. Like I keep coming back to the same stack of books over and over again. So it's a great question. And then at the same time, if you're reading something and it's not working for you, sometimes people feel like they have to finish the book. So I always plug this idea that no, if the book's not working for you, close it and move on to the next one.
Chris, I I will agree with you in almost every facet of that. I do want to go back to one thing that Dalton said with regards to the persuasion and influence of books. And we've got a private chat that we always communicate in internally as we're doing these. I guarantee for a lot of these people, if I ask them, were books instrumental in your decision to join the military or the special forces? I know for Rich and I, as we were chatting, it was because we read the Vietnam or the UDT era books, historical books that pushed us to say, hey, I want to be part of this elite organization. I need to find out if I have what it takes. So the power and influence of books is massive. Now, back to the question, Nigel's question, are you always going to have a core set of books? Absolutely. And I think we all do. And as Chris just commented, if you get into a book and it's not resonating with you and you choose to put it down, that's fine. I'm trying to remember the leader, and this is an old adage. It's not original. He said, judge a leader not by how big his TV is, rather how large his library is and how well read they are. And that leader that said that line to me correlated readership with better leadership. The more you read, the larger your depth and breadth of knowledge becomes. If you limit yourself to a few core books, then you're limiting yourself in depth and breadth. And David Epstein, a recent book that I read, which was a recommendation of a mentor of mine, was Range. And he talked about how generalists rule the world or triumph in a world where people have over-specialized in one thing. When people specialize in something, they read only books that pertain to that specific subject, and they're robbing themselves of, again, that breadth and depth, which enables you to be a better problem solver because you're drawing from a wider experience base. So just keep that in mind as you're debating whether, hey, I should just stick with a set of core books or if I should diversify and get as much knowledge as possible. I will always choose more knowledge over less.
Mike, I'm with you in life-changing books. I was, like I said, I was a broadcast journalism major in college, and I wanted nothing more than to be a reporter. And then we had 9/11, and then we had we went into Afghanistan, and we went into Iraq, and I was watching this on TV, and I was watching and I was reading books about what was going on, for the first war almost broadcast live. And this, for somebody who was studying journalism, I mean, this was the greatest time ever because it changed journalism forever, in that it was war on live TV. And so I was going to go be a war reporter. And then I read a book called Embedded, and Embedded was written by reporters who were embedded with our forces overseas, in these conflicts. And right then, after reading that book, I put it down and I said, wait a second, reporting on this stuff is really cool, but I can go do this, and I can grow a beard and long hair and ride a horse and change the world. And then if I want to report on it later, I can do that. So there's so many opportunities out there where you'll pick something up, you'll read it, you'll learn, and you'll say, wow, my life's gone in a whole different direction because I picked this up.
Hey, Fran, I think you just described the special forces community, the Green Berets perfectly, long hair and beard. Rich and Diviney and I always preferred, to shave our heads and to shave. But hey, each community their own.
Great points, y'all. So the big question I have that's burning is, we have a bunch of leaders on here who volunteered to come on a discussion about readership, improving leadership. And I'm curious what each one of you, all of you, have on your nightstand. What is the book you're currently reading and why? Let's start with Mike.
Well, actually, it is a book written by somebody on this panel. I got an early edition, Rich Diviney, The Attributes, which he just mailed to me. And so, Rich, thank you for that. I took that very dear to heart that I got one of those copies. Hey, I will say, and this is a completely different subject, is also the role of writing as leaders. And I learned this from Jocko. He writes 1,500 words a day. And I used to never write. I used to read. But he said writing is the method to take what you read and apply it to the world, and it helps articulate it. So as I read Rich's book, and I know Rich will agree, there's also the writing component to leadership. And you want to challenge yourself, write a book. I will say that it challenged my beliefs and what I held to be dear as I spoke to more people like Lisa, Fran, and Dalton, and Chris about their leadership experiences that poured into the talent war.
Well, since you just got a plug, Rich, you get to go next. What are you reading? I'm very curious on this one.
Well, of course, the talent war, right? I mean, that's of course. But well, yes, but you know what? I'm rereading. It's funny, Mike, you brought this up. I'm rereading Range right now. It's such a great book about generalists, and I really enjoyed the first time. So it's one of those ones I read several months ago, and then picked off my shelf again to read again. So. Reading that one now, definitely highly recommended. Great.
I think we just became the group that is shamelessly plugging each of our books and products.
Okay, so Nayara is currently a digital marketing associate at EF Overwatch and a college student, correct? So do you even have time to read?
Yes, before I go to sleep every day, of course. What I'm currently reading now is a book called Why We Sleep from Matthew Walker, and obviously talks about sleep, and it teaches you about the importance of it and how improving sleep can help improve every aspect of your life. And as we have been discussing throughout this live, on how a book can influence you so much in the decisions you make and how your behavior can change. From reading this book, I honestly have been applying all of these teachings, and I feel more focused. I feel more energized during the day just because I'm reading a book about sleep. And to respond to a question from the audience from Andrew McConnell, where he says, well, is it important to read before bed, or how important is rest to synthesize the information gained throughout the day? Well, as a response, it is so important to rest, and resting will help you retain so much information before sleep is essential, and just throughout the day, the information that you gain all day.
Yeah, great segue into that. Thank you. And, touching on sleep, my 2 hours of sleep is, I probably should read that book and maybe catch up a little bit. But, we all have different routines. And, one of the things that she really kind of highlighted, I just finished the $1 Billion Spy on audiobook, background noise, working out, kind of that rest period. I don't have to focus on it, but I can kind of, listen to it. And I'm reading a couple books on servant leadership. And I just finished Great Leaders Ask Great Questions by John Maxwell. And so I've been kind of taking a break, working on, a few other things. But one of the things that I really focus on is routine. And I'm a morning person. I know some people aren't. I usually get up and I spend at least an hour and a half reading the paper, whether it's the Wall Street Journal, whether it's a book, whether it's just a couple pages, finding an article that I'm interested in that takes, 10 minutes. But I spend at least an hour catching up on current events and reading. And even though we're even though we're LinkedIn Live right now and other live, across social media platforms, I got rid of Facebook. And I freed up about 10 to 15 hours a month that I could refocus and re-energize into reading or finding something else to do. And that really helped out. So get a routine and jump into that. Touching on that, listen to background noise. Find that routine, find what you're interested in, read those books. And when you kind of, get burnout, find something that you can just sift through or go back to an old book you read and just touch on it. So keep reading.
Yeah, and so I'll add, General Mattis was probably one of the Marines that most people know the most for being a reader, and one of our most recent Secretaries of Defense, and he was well known for moving from duty station to duty station with about 6,000 books in a library. So I've actually got one of Mattis's books on my bookshelf. It's called Warriors and Citizens. And Mattis was pretty well known for a quote that he said he never got flat-footed because of his reading. And so that was something that that just stuck with me for a long time. And I think it's over to you, Fran.
So I'm reading a book called You're It. It's written by two Harvard professors who wrote a book about crisis management. And it's about people who immediately find themselves as the leader of a crisis situation, and where they have to look internally and say, what do you mean I'm it? And somebody looks at them and says, yep, you're the person, go lead us through this. And so, it's a great opportunity for me to kind of get back to those themes that I care about. And, how do you lead through chaos? How do you manage these things? What I will say before Lisa wraps it up is that, we talked a lot about, and Dalton talked about it too, time, right? You have time. Because I've done the numbers on this thing as I was preparing for this, and I said, we as a culture, we want things now, and so we look at books and we say, oh, I'm not going to read because it's too hard. It's going to take too long. Well, if we do the math and we say, well, what if I read 10 pages a day? If I read 10 pages a day, that's like what, 10, 15 minutes? If you read 10 to 15 pages a day for 10 to 15 minutes, at the end of the month, you've read about 300 pages. Most books are 200 to 300 pages, especially in this world of development. So that means you got a book a month. And I don't think that any of us, if we were to look back at the end of the year and say that I read 12 books, maybe 15 books this year, I would say that most of us read a lot more in that year than we did the previous year, possibly the past few years combined, if we only did 10 minutes a day. So that's my pitch. That's the effective intel, drive, humility, curiosity. That's how we get it back. And if you multiply that over a 5, 10, 20-year career, maybe we'll be like General Mattis, but probably not. Because, he's definitely read more books than anybody I've ever heard of.
So we've all talked about books, and obviously I've mentioned the books that I'm reading, but Dalton brought up a good point about current events. And so one of the things I like to do is read a variety of current event type periodicals. And so Friday's my recovery day. I sit on the bike for way longer than I should. And again, I already talked about an ultra, so everybody knows endurance is okay in my book. But I will read The Economist every Friday morning when it comes out digitally. They come out digitally faster than they come out in paper, but I like those weekly periodicals because there's usually a little bit more thought put in the articles and a little bit less of that instant gratification kind of social media sway that you get in a lot of the instant articles. So something to remember is that, current events matters as well. Before I hand it off to Nayara for her to kind of sum up the 3 points she got out of this, I don't want to forget to plug, I don't want to get it wrong. Fran will be leading a discussion on Thursday, understanding a leader's role in the organization. Is that correct? Yeah.
That is, yes.
All right. Okay. So don't forget to tune in on Thursday. And Nayara, I'm very interested to hear what you got out of this 58-minute discussion.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, everyone, for inviting me to this great discussion with all of you who are amazing leaders. And I'm so glad everyone here reads. I feel very honored and was able to gather many interesting points throughout. The first main point is from you, Lisa, about how reading helps with your personal and professional development. Sometimes reading about a book can help you communicate with the person, engage, and connect with people that are reading the same book, or even align with people who just read as well. Because you gain knowledge from every read that you make, and with regards to your organization and with your employees, if everyone reads there, then that will facilitate everyone to belong. And that would make everyone to become a part of the same tribe, per se, or even acknowledging another person's read may help you improve your connection with your coworkers. Because as discussed on our first ever LinkedIn Live panel about visual diversity versus diversity of thought, everyone's different. Everyone comes from a different background. So by reading, we can start to understand the reasons why people think the way they do. The second main point was from Rich, because he said reading increases creativity. And one of the audience's questions was about what kind of genre you should read. Is it fiction? Is it a momentary journal? And then Rich said, well, because people should read whatever they're interested in, because that is what will increase their creativity. Fiction, for example, allows you to escape. It increases your creativity constantly. So again, as he said, reading allows us to get out of our fishbowl and allows us to look at the water that we have been swimming in and maybe make changes and improve your daily life through that. So reading what you prefer is always best. And we can also take the example from Fran, where up until 6 months ago, he did not like audiobooks, but now he noticed that it works for him. So as a result, he reads so much more. He discovered that he can highlight, take notes, or whatever you want on the screen, just like a hard book, a hard copy book. And now he reads so much more. And then, so listen to yourself and just work from there and start increasing your readings throughout. Another main point is strictly about the importance of audiobooks. They are great, again, if it works for you. As Dalton mentioned, you can start an audiobook on your 1 hour drive, and then that hour drive will pass so quickly. And an audiobook also gives you knowledge, also gives you creativity and information. And then the last point is about Rich, again, when he said, leadership is a behavior, not a position. So if you're a leader and you tell others to read a certain book, then your coworkers and the ones around you will understand that leader's perspective, will understand the organization's culture, and then they will start applying this behavior as well. So as Mike said, he felt so humble when Rich lent him his book, and then he could read it as well and understand Rich's mind and like how he thought, and he could have a communication with him through that book.
Nayara, thank you. As we're discussing this, there's a box of books next to my desk, which was going to be a surprise for the EF Overwatch team. I don't know if they would view it as a surprise, because reading books about recruiting isn't exactly on anyone's on the top of their list, but that's the space we operate in. And, of course, they're going to read The Talent War if they haven't already. I mean, we're going to read Recruit Rock Stars, who evidence-based recruiting, and we're going to write about those. We're going to read them. We're going to write about those to increase their knowledge base, because we have a young force like Nayara, like Will behind the scenes here, to increase our knowledge base in the executive search and sort of talent industry. So sometimes you do force readership on your people. It's part of leadership, and sometimes they will thank you for it. Most of the times they will thank you. Thank you in spades, guys. An amazing panel. Closing this out to the group. Lisa already hit that Fran's leading a session on Thursday. Where can you find information about these LinkedIn live sessions, which we're doing 2 a week right now? We're going to increase these to 3 a week. The demand is that high. Naturally, listening to this panel, I understand why. I'm learning. And the reason we limit it to 3, usually with Nayara and her counterpart Michelle, is if you're going to read a book, take away at least 3 things. Keep it simple. Keep it to that. The 3 main points. That's what I try to do with every book. If somebody asks me to summarize a book, I give them 3 points. So you can find information about this group, the Talent War group, on LinkedIn. Especially the live sessions. We have all the invites there. And for our viewers, if your company is looking for an amazing speaker like Lisa, like Fran, Dalton, Chris, or Rich, go to thetalentwar.com. You can book them to speak. So guys, I appreciate your time today. Fran, I'm looking forward to Thursday. Lisa just set the bar, so you've got some big shoes to fill. I have no doubt you'll do it. And looking forward to that, guys. To everyone who's joined, have a great day. Get after it and set time aside. Just 15 minutes, like Fran said. Just 15 minutes. Set time aside to read. All right, guys. We're out.